All right. And now we're recording. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to yet another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Welcome to an episode that is absolutely positively sure to get us kicked off of any social media platform. But hey, YOLO. Sometimes we have good ideas that don't necessarily fit within the construct of the cybersecurity discussions. It's traditional security podcasts have. But as you guys know, if you're a listener, we often touch the third rail pretty aggressively. And sometimes we figure out that there's like 7 or 8 rails and we just go ahead and touch them all. And so like this episode might get, I don't know, maybe a bit ranty, a tad bit saucy. We'll see what happens. We've brought along Kevin for that very reason. Say hi, Kevin.
Hello.
And well, you want to introduce yourself a little bit, or how much do you want to introduce yourself? Because I got a cool intro I could do for you, but you won't like it.
Would if you were doing an intro of me, would you talking about like long cons, my love of the long con, and the way we bonded?
You are the king of the long con.
or bonding over Twitter accounts called Lohan Parenting Tips and stuff.
Yes, I love it.
Do you remember
yes,
that? No,
I do. I still have that account. I don't know what happened to it. It hasn't been.
Do you? I searched for it today and I couldn't find it. Okay. Well, anyways, hi, I'm Kevin. I lead a product management team at a large AI platform provider, working on security tools and enhancement products for meeting security and compliance needs. And for a while now, I've kind of called myself a security therapist because most of what I do is have conversations with people about their problems. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, tell me about your problems. And I try to guide them like a therapist would. So
you probably charge way less than a therapist, though, Kevin.
Probably. And that's when I'm not doing a long con of some kind.
Well, you got to have the long con because, as a therapist, you need to make sure you're keeping them coming back.
Yes.
Oh boy. Really? Like, come on, James.
The first conspiracy theory comes out.
We're 2 seconds into the podcast, and here you go. All right.
That wasn't the one I was talking about. That was going to happen, though. Just to be
you did warn us. You did warn us. All right. This episode really started as a conversation on a Telegram channel that I started ages ago, and it includes some usual suspects, but it's definitely all like third rail topics that we generally don't want to discuss out in public until we decided like this one may just be, even though it's that version of spicy, it still may be the one that we pull out. And Kevin, I think before I told you we weren't recording, now we're recording. Give the background because I'm going to do a terrible job at it. You're way better at that.
I am never going to do it as well as I did.
That's true.
Truth.
So this was before Christmas. I think I'd gone back and looked at the chat logs, and there were 3 things that came up in the news kind of in rapid succession. So first, Australia implemented a ban on social media for people under the age of 16. So this is, they took the 10 most popular or most used social media apps and said, you have to be 16 to use these apps. And also very interesting is it's not the just like, hey, tell me how old you are and I believe you kind of thing. Like they actually have to take some proactive measures to verify the age of people that are using those apps. So that happened. And then the very next day after that, there was an executive order that came out from the Trump administration to limit what states can do in regulating AI. And both of those things had been heavily lobbied against by big tech. And then like right after we had been hearing that, then we find out that a particular large social media company is making a significant percentage, about 10% of their ad revenue for ads that come from scams and banned products and that kind of thing. And they've stood up an anti-fraud team, but then they also really tried to hamstring the anti-fraud team and kind of say like, I want you to do a good enough job that we won't get fined, but don't actually impact our revenue. Like, don't be successful at this. And so that kind of
got me crazy, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to do is hamstring you like that. When all of a sudden they're like, here's a bunch of Windows XP machines and DSL routers. Go forth and monitor for fraud, please.
Well, yeah, and so this was reporting that had come out from Reuters, and it's fascinating stuff. But like I said, it was 10% of their revenue comes from what they know to be scams, and then the fraud team was told they could not impact revenue by more than 0.15%. So be successful, but don't even be 1% successful.
I wonder what was 0.15 of $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Somebody's bonus.
Yeah.
And so, so the conversation kind of went everywhere. We kind of talked about this ethical push-pull that can exist between grow the business and, be safe and secure, secure the business, but grow the business. That was something, I had put on LinkedIn a few days after that about just my experience at a different platform company where I was in charge of handling abuse on that platform, and how it's like, well, we could do this and it would like crush the abuse overnight. And it's like, yeah, but our monthly active user count might suffer. So don't do that. We'll just, come up with other things to handle this.
This is this is the conversation that I think we could have over drinks, record, and have like a 10-part episode. But I do want to start. That's a lot. Thank you, by the way. That's a great synopsis. But I do want to start with the fact that, like, all of us on this episode right now are dads. Like, we have kids. Jim, yours might be slightly older than mine, but at some point, all of them were kids. And all four of us grew up at a time where when you said something dumb, at very most, it followed you for a school year, maybe a year and a half, but eventually it got forgotten because kids are short attention spans. They move on to the next thing. Some other stupid kid said. As long as it wasn't you again, you were pretty safe. Nowadays, that doesn't exist, right? You do something stupid once, it's everywhere on the internet, and the internet never forgets, and the amplification is insane. So kids are taking their own lives. It's social media is absolutely ruining kids' lives. Like it's really hard to debate that point unless you make money off of social media, and then you can find all sorts of positive social good. Now, there is lots to say that, social media connects people in disparate communities. And there's a double-edged sword in saying that it connects people of like minds that would never otherwise have found each other, because the crazies standing on a street corner yelling at passersby about the apocalypse and the lizard people, you're like, yeah, you're a nutter. It's fine. Nobody cares. And then they find each other on the internet, and suddenly there's a group, right? Because that's what
Chicago. Let's see. We've been to that same location, Raph.
That's not false. But I've always said it's a very special place in hell for those that invent this type of technology and then sort of go, well, I can't be faulted for what you do, what happens on it. Like, yeah, you can. And that brings us to a really weird spot, I think, for those of us that are freedom of speech hawks. Like, we really truly believe in freedom of speech. Like, it's absolute, right? It's either yes or no. And until you get to this spot, and then it starts to get kind of uncomfortable, at least for me, because I really, really don't want somebody that's at an age where their mind is not yet fully formed to logic and isn't resilient to the let's just go ahead and clear the explicit tag fucking bullshit that streams from the internet, 24/7 by 365 in volume. On the other hand, to regulate that goes to what the previous administration here tried to, was it the previous administration or two administrations back? I don't know, tried to do with like, hey, when COVID hit, right? Two administrations back. So when the COVID hit, right, it was like, oh, we're going to regulate what people can say. You're like, yeah, but that's censorship. Like, the difference between censorship and government propaganda and then like actually doing good. Who gets to do the good? Who gets to be the arbiter of what's good and bad and where the line is? And I think that's a place where I want to start this conversation, because that's a messy subject. Feel free to jump in, guys.
Well, I was just going to say the first thing that strikes me is, I mean, there's one thing that's kind of complain about theories concerning vaccinations, but when somebody is lower than a certain age, I think generally, to your point earlier, Raph, socially we can all agree that people of a certain age below that should be exposed. So I think it's one of those freedom of speech versus sort of almost ethical lines in the sand that I think we all
Okay.
share as
Yeah.
humans.
It's
right?
that freedom of reach, right? Isn't that what everybody kind of started going to
Oh.
when they started arguing the freedom of speech? It turned, like, oh, I can say whatever I want, and then the platform starts like, well, you can say whatever you want, but you don't have freedom of reach. We don't have to give you the platform to be able to get it out to anything past how far your voice.
That's true,
can carry.
because that's what social media is doing, is amplifying and giving you reach.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I think in the case of something like the Australia ban, I think it's just kind of recognizing that we really are never going to be able to effectively stop bad stuff from coming onto a platform. I mean, we even putting in a best effort, and so we have to kind of say like this. The feeling is that before a certain age, you're just not going to be prepared for the things you could encounter on this platform.
Yeah. Yeah, and your ability, and like this is the thing when you're talking to and about kids, human beings that don't have that ability to decipher and reason out truth, objective truth versus opinion versus reality versus somebody else's perception of it or fiction, if you will. And look, adults, like, let's be clear, look around you guys. There's a lot of adults that have a hard time discerning, truth versus their own mental reality. And even when objective science is introduced, like trying to get, saying this is not, kids should be able to figure this out. That's not even, like, I have a hard time saying, let them decide, because no.
I mean, how frequently do you still see somebody on Facebook posting I do not give Facebook permission to use my photos
right.
thing? It's like, it's
Right,
like,
exactly.
yeah, did you know that if you just paste this in, you're
all the sovereign citizens that are getting pulled over right now.
Right, exactly.
It's the problem.
That's a good point.
The problem comes in though of the perception that you get from what you see on social media is typically inaccurate from what it is. And you could say, I mean, a lot of it is similar to the news. Like, should somebody under 16 be watching the 24/7 news coverage that's happening all the time? I mean, pick a channel. Anyone's biased in any direction. And the news would make you believe that something that they're showing is an everyday, all day occurrence. But if it was, it wouldn't be news, right? Like, they are outliers. But at a certain age, you don't have the perception to be able to really grasp that and say, okay, I see this happened. This isn't something that is a regular, I'm going to walk down the street and this is what's happening situation. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so you take that and put it on social media, and now you're getting every idea under the sun, and probably more than half of the posts are people just posting false things because it elevates their ad revenue. It gets clicks, right? It's the clickbait. It's all that. So they're just saying something completely against what they truly believe, just because it will get people to look at it, But at an age, right, you don't know how, you don't have any other interactions or information to be able to correlate that and be able to say, I don't think that's true based on this other stuff. It's just all I saw was this.
And then I would say you have the overtly false things, like if I'm posting about, the earth is flat or something like that. And
wait a minute. Easy.
No, that's second conspiracy theory of the podcast, right? So I could be posting something overtly false, or that, Barack Obama is actually a lizard wearing a mask or something like that. And, I think some teenagers would be able to look at that. But then there's the things that are true but give false impressions. So everybody puts a curated version of themselves online, and so it's easy to start seeing how, like, everybody else is going to parties. Everybody else has really cool friends. Everybody else is better than me. My life, I know what my life is like, but then when I see, because nobody ever is like posting online about, you know, yeah, I got in a big fight with my husband today or something like that. You don't put that out there.
You post perfection.
You post perfection, then you start thinking about like, well, I did have a fight with my spouse. Like, and so even though nobody is telling you that, you know, hey, normal people don't have fights with their spouses, you can start to internalize that. And then especially as you get younger, same thing with body image issues, right? You know, you see all the people who are posting their beautiful bodies. And that's where things like the algorithm can really become dangerous because, for example, if you go on to something like, say, Instagram and TikTok, and you start searching, you know, let's say somebody is really concerned, like, do I maybe have an eating disorder? I've been thinking about some stuff. You start researching those eating disorders, eventually the algorithm will start feeding you crash diets. It will actually start to start giving, because like, because you're interested in nutrition and you know, weight loss. So here, and now you get more influencers coming and telling you that, you know, you're kind of a fatty. And if you would just go on a straight Metamucil diet for 3 weeks, you could be beautiful before prom.
And you don't have to search. You just slow down. Something. You just slow down and it goes, oh, wait, you looked at that for 1 millisecond longer than the other thing. And it'll absolutely capture that as well.
So guys, I've read multiple stories and where people actually did research where they created a brand new account, set themselves up as a preteen, teenager, and started with like, oh, here's the, you know, they always ask you like what things of interest to get you started someplace, right? Start off with like, oh, I love music and cars and rock bands and this stuff. And like within minutes of scrolling, suddenly you go down these like radicalization rabbit holes, not to make a pun. But it's because what these the algorithm is optimized to feed you what will get you to continue scrolling. And people that draw these up, that write these algorithms out, they know that what gets you scrolling is rage, right? Getting angry at something, and it's high emotional content. And if they catch, you know, your eye on let's find a real example, anti-Semitic content, for example, right? You scroll through and you have, and suddenly within, you know, 10 minutes of you scrolling, you're watching people talk about how we should just end America and this experiment has failed. And like 30 minutes later, you're joining a militia and like, what is happening? Right? Like but
not quite 30. Give me a little more credit. I was on for 90 minutes before I joined the militia.
but like this is, you would think that at some point we'd go, okay, I want to feed you content that you're interested in, that would keep you scrolling. But like, I want to limit the pulls into crazy town. But it turns out that like research repeatedly has shown that that's where these algorithms go. And what's really more, I think the part that scares me more than anything else is when you, when like media was media, right? Before it was social media and algorithms existed, you would read a whole bunch of different opinions and you would formulate some thought in your head, and then you'd see other opinions about it and you'd go, huh, there are other opinions. You have now, when you've got an opinion, the algorithm figures that out. Like Jim was saying, by like the millisecond more you spend on a particular topic or a particular message on a page, and suddenly that's all you're being fed. Evidence of this was all over the place, and they post it during every election. Google does it to you, right? If they figure out you're alt left, alt right, center left, centrist, whatever, there's no centrist according to Google, that it'll tell you, it'll feed you, like you look up President Obama and it'll give you like, if you're a far righter, it'll give you like, is a lizard person, is not actually born in the United States, all kinds of crazy shit. And if you are far left, it will tell you that like all the other things that, I don't know, I've never really looked at stuff up, but like all the other things that make the other candidate look like a crazy person. And what's happening is it's rapidly radicalizing society to the fringes. And this has never happened in human history before, because we didn't have access to information like this in this way, with algorithms that drive us into these things. And so, like, when you look, and that's adults, but now you look at kids with soft, squishy, formable gray matter. I don't know what kind of conscience you have to lack, right? Like, how much do you lack conscience to be able to say, yeah, this is great. Let's just do, as long as I'm making money, I don't care.
Well, that's where I was going to kind of go, is that for a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, especially if you were talking about like recruiting for, an extremist group or something like that, right? I do feel like the social media platforms make an effort to stop that. They are searching for it. They are trying to shut that down. Where I think I get a little concerned is that that's because Proud Boys doesn't buy advertising. But if they did, it seems like what we've seen is that, well, if they were buying advertising, then we might actually just kind of ignore that.
I don't know. A few weeks ago, after we had originally discussed this, I made a conscious effort to pop open Instagram and take a completely counterpoint to my moral and ethical views, and like find one, like go search for one post or one post that somebody put up that is completely counterfactual to what I believe, which was what the algorithm would feed me previously to this. And then I scrolled on that, and I kind of kept going, right, Jim? As you said, just keep scrolling. And within 30 minutes, it was feeding me stuff that was completely opposite to what I'm used to seeing, first off, in terms of moral, ethical, and political kind of views. And it was going really far, really fast. And so now I'm like, all right, can I get back to my stuff really quick? Like, how fast can I get back to like real me? And it turns out it's actually hard to get, like, once it starts pushing you down that, you have to make a big effort to get out of that, sort of closing your account, which is scary.
Because it's trying to put you in that group and get you in that community. So it's a self-fulfilling, self-looking lollipop bubble, right? And so getting out's hard unless you give it something very, very specific, tangential, Yeah. And I just want to make a point is, and I gotta be careful because I can go on a tirade, but I know we talk about AI a lot, right? But the way the human brain works and the way that it absorbs information, what we're really good at is easily manipulated with imagery and sounds, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, imagine, and we don't have to imagine it, where it's right there. You go on LinkedIn and see people commenting on posts, thinking that the picture and this little article is real, and it's clearly a manipulation of the truth. Kevin, you mentioned it earlier, right? So the conversation we're having concerning the very young, and which I think do apply to the elderly as well, right? For different reasons.
Yeah. Similar. Yep.
So we can't forget about, people who are, where I'm getting close to, right? But the net of it is this is going to get really bad because it's going to be easier to sort of pull you into a zone that, and Raph, in your case, you sort of experimented into that sort of pit or whatever that you got dropped into, but you can be drawn into it and it can look just as normal as every day. It just sort of morphs, and before you know it, you're in a different situation, or it can be used very dramatically. There was what recently in the news, unfortunately, a young person took their life because of an AI picture, right? And that is like, of all the things, I mean, honestly, are we going to allow this to happen? I mean, that's crazy, right?
So, but that's the thing, right? Is you get into this is I guess the core of this conversation is technology is going to, like, AI can take a legitimate photo, your prom photo you posted online, Jim, you and my professional photo that we post on LinkedIn, and make explicit photos out of that. And it's getting harder and harder to tell the real from the fake. And when kids do it to each other, it's awful.
It's awful. And kids have not yet developed the the moral maturity, I guess I would say, to recognize just how wrong what they're doing is. Yes, they know it's wrong. I'm not going to pretend that like, oh, I didn't know this was wrong, but I don't think that they can reason at the same level as an adult as to just how damaging it is to somebody if you distribute fake nude images of one of your classmates or something like that. And that's part of the reason why I, when Australia put that ban in place, I said, yeah, that I actually am really supportive of that. And if I had my way, it would be even older than 16. So
yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, are they really fully ready at 16 to be able to interpret this stuff? Again, it's about what you have access to outside of what you see in social media to be able to handle what you see in social media. I do wonder, and I've thought about this before, like from an adult perspective, at what point does the negative start disappearing? Like there's so much dirt, or there's so many things out there that it's easy enough to be able to say, nope, that's fake, that didn't happen. Or you know what, yeah, so what? Like at some point everybody's got something where it starts to become like, okay, listen, everybody's upside down in their house. All right, well then nobody's upside down their house. We'll fix it. Everybody's got dirt on them that's sitting out there. Well, great, everybody's got it. Like you can look at me and judge me, but I can look at you and judge you. Yeah. When does that balance out? And then when you bring that to children, like how do you get it to where you're teaching them how to handle that stuff that's going to happen? Because we're not going to be able to stop it. But how do you handle it? And I think that's where a lot of the kids struggle is you're put into a situation that your parents have never seen before. We've talked about this, right? Like we're a generation, we didn't grow up with this. We're learning as we go. We've never seen that. So we never think to have a discussion to be like, oh, when I was a kid, I had this problem. Here's how I dealt with it. So they don't know how to deal with it. So when you get that message on Instagram that says, hey, I've got a picture of you doing something explicit, even if you didn't do it, they're like, oh crap, what do I do? Right? Like it's a freak out. I don't know how to handle it. So, how do you build up that capability while still keeping them off of it? Because I agree with that. But how do you build that ability for people to be able to handle that? I think it's the same ability we have. Kids today don't know how to handle rejection. They don't know, there's a lot of situations they don't know how to handle. Right. And then so what do? They drop into rage. They drop into these other defaults because they were never taught how to handle these situations.
Why is it that they don't know how to handle those situations though?
Because we give a trophy for participation.
I would say it's because children today are much more isolated because of their use of these apps. They've isolated themselves and they don't get that social interaction. Yeah. And now as AI is getting better, they're actually turning to AI companions. So I listened to some the other day. It said 50% of kids between 13 and 17 have regular conversations with an AI companion, basically.
Holy shit.
I now have a friend who, because I don't know how to talk to real people, so I will talk to this synthetic person. And shockingly, the synthetic person always agrees with you, never holds you accountable, never gives you any guidance that anything about you should change in response to the world. But I mean, so we've created a situation where our children isolate themselves and then talk to a make-believe friend. And that is the future.
It's interesting. It's here. It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, Jim, you're probably past this. Raph, you're not there yet. I'm not sure where you are with it, Kevin, yet. But like I've got almost a 16-year-old. So we're getting close to driver's license age. And you'd be amazed the number of kids that turn 16 that have zero interest in getting a driver's license.
Yep. So for people who are listening, I'm also a leader in Scouting America, the organization, most people know it as Boy Scouts. So I get to actually interact with lots of teenagers. And I have found that very few of them, like I remember when I was turning 16, I was like, I couldn't wait to get that driver's license.
15, baby. I got my learner's permit.
Right. Like get me the heck out of here.
Yeah.
And like, oh my gosh, my daughter, when she was 18, still a bunch of her friends had just no interest in getting that license. A bunch of the kids that I know in scouting, and they're like, I guess I could get the license. I know I should, but
I think there's a couple reasons for that, though. I think one, to what you were saying, right? Like all their interactions online. like nobody hangs out after school with their friends anymore. You don't go hang out at the Kmart parking lot. You're online. I don't need to be at your house to be chatting with you online, and I can chat with the whole group.
That's
at
a sad
one
state of
time.
affairs.
But I think that adds to it. But then I also think they really don't have any place to go because everything's online. Like, where are you going to go? Remember, I mean, you go hang out wherever, and that's what you
I don't know.
did.
Arcade. Look, there's an arcade. It's an arcade close to my house. Malls, some still exist. There are like places to go hang out.
But they don't do the physical hangout though, right?
Yeah,
and then if they
fair.
are going to do that, your face is so embedded in that phone. Who wants to be the driver?
Yeah, you're right there.
I'd rather take the Uber because I can't drive because I got to be connected, right? So who wants to be the designated driver to drive everybody while they're all connected and you're sitting in silence in the car?
Hey, before we run out of time on this, oh, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say one thing is I just want to comment on two elements of this bizarre social economy we're talking about. One is people who are the thing that's always shocked me is it's evolved to the point where we have influencers. Kevin's already said the word a couple of times. We've all said it in some way, shape, or form. And these people who are making millions of dollars because they just post, and so that becomes a target for young people. I want to be like that. I want to have millions.
I want to be a
views.
YouTuber.
Yeah, right. And it's another form of draw into that particular area, and so that end of itself, likes and follows and stuff like that, becomes a form of economy that young people know how to take advantage of, or everybody tries to take advantage of. And as we get into adulthood and businesses, we pay big money for that, right? So anyway.
All right, that's a good point. But before we run out of time, I wanted to like bring back, as part of this was the impetus for this conversation was that whole fraud discussion. But I want to couch the last half of this as how much do we really believe, or do we want to allow the companies that, Facebook, Instagram, so Meta, all the other platforms, right? Snapchat and TikTok and God only knows what else. How much do we hold them accountable? How much do we have to? How much do we have to, as the providers, moderate? How much? What's their accountability for when something terrible happens? Like somebody, talks to your chatbot. The chatbot says, "Hey, you should just kill yourself," and they do. Like, are you culpable? Or is this just, oops, technology went sideways? Like, that's a real, very, I don't know, tenuous discussion, but it's got to happen in some real context out there. Without, and I would say, without all the money that gets poured in from these social media companies to influence our policymakers.
So to a certain extent, that is happening. I mentioned the AI companionship. And one of the maybe probably the biggest well-known of them is one where you can basically you make a character. Like I've made a Harry Potter character, and now it's a chatbot, and you can interact with that chatbot or something like that. And people have put up things like, for example, there was a Jeffrey Epstein bot that it says it logged nearly 3,000 chats before it was removed. People talking to that, right? But in some cases, those AI companions have recommended suicide, and that has happened. And now they are being taken, they're facing civil lawsuits over that. So to a certain extent that happens. The problem is that it's like, until there's an actual dead child, there's nothing. There's nothing between like, you're a good actor all the way to dead child, and there's nothing in the middle there, which really stinks, I think.
Yeah,
that's where I'd like to see more done around that kind of thing, especially in cases where it's something where the organization or the company is actually able to make money. Like when we talk about the advertisements for, advertisements for things like sex trafficking, for example. It's like, okay, that this is something that should not be allowed on the platform. You've proven that you have the capability of doing it. This particular company, they'd put some measures in place, and it had a dramatic effect on the amount of fraud. And then when they saw what was happening to the revenues, they shut that down, because like, oh yeah, we need to pull back on that. It's affecting the money too much. So that's where I would like to see some regulatory action come in. And I want to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes that we made with not regulating social media when we get into the AI side of things. And I'm glad to see that some of the states are putting in place some measures around this kind of thing. Because I don't want another, because like Australia, they put the ban on 16-year-olds, and that was kind of one of the questions that I wanted to ask before we finished out is, I mean, can we put the toothpaste back into the tube, or are we just 4 old men on here complaining about kids these days?
Yeah, that's
Australia's going to tell us that answer. I think we're going to find out.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Have I lost my internet connection?
Nope, you're still here.
You're good.
That's it. But I think Jim, the reality is that Australia will tell us. I mean, we'll see whether that experiment works or not. But it's going to be super difficult to guess whether Kevin's been kicked off, and he'll be back shortly. There he is. But I think because we've already done the thing where like kids already have social media, and to say now you can't, that's going to be, I mean, it's going to be tough.
Why are the kids being punished? And I don't want to really frame social media in the form of punishment, but we all know that, it's not necessarily in this case the consumer's fault, right? I struggle with this one for that very reason you mentioned, Raph, and that is the people who run these systems there needs to be some form of responsibility when it comes to obvious things like sex trafficking or images of young people that other people have, because now you can declothe people using AI kind of stuff. And that's running rampant across the internet right now. Mm-hmm. So that's where I go back to something I said earlier, is there is a sort of a social norm that I think we can all kind of get on board with here. Right. Mm-hmm. And these companies are putting up the front as if they're doing it to fraud, to Kevin's point, and then going, that's actually costing us some money. Meanwhile, we have huge swaths of other businesses, banks, insurance companies, small companies that make tires for cars or whatever are under these enormous pressures around cybersecurity compliance. And if a little bit of privacy or something leaks out, all of a sudden that tire business is fined. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm saying, do you see the sort of the way that we talk about regulation, Kevin, and I think I think we have tons of regulation out there that put companies in a position of responsibility for their behaviors when it comes to information. And I think some of these social media things are just saying, well, it's not our information. This is what people are putting up. And so I think it's kind of created a shield. If we don't address this soon, to your point earlier, the whole concept of AI will kind of lose control, even though there's some pressures around building better AI regulated scenarios. But I don't know.
So California did something. Actually, I have a note here about this. So AB 316 in California passed in 2025, and it was specifically a ban on AI makers blaming the technology itself for harming people. So if I make something like if ChatGPT tells Raph to go kill himself and then he does it, you can't go into court and be like, well, AI is kind of a black box and we don't know why it made the conclusion that Raph should kill himself. That's no longer a valid defense in those kinds of things. So I did like that. But you said something at the very beginning of that, though. You said, why are the kids being punished? And I'm curious, in what way would they be being punished?
So I think punish is a terrible word, right? Okay. In this case. Okay. Let me put it. So we mentioned earlier that taking social media from some way, you have like these, reflex to it, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's their window into the world. So let me rephrase it, instead of being punished, but being put in a situation. Imagine you have a young person using social media, all completely legit. There's plenty of them out there, right? Everybody's not doing bad things, right?
Right.
And maybe it's a component of school. I mean, we see people now saying AI is a key component in the classroom, right? As an example. So I'm not saying punish, but say a capability is being removed from them, not because of necessarily a fault of their own, but the system provides an avenue that they could be exposed to information and they shouldn't be exposed to. We can all agree that they shouldn't be seeing. I'm not going to say it on a podcast, obviously. So I don't necessarily say punish, but in a realm it could be viewed as punishment. I guarantee you, there's a 15.5-year-old kid in Australia right now that's losing his mind because he or she can't get on social media and they perceive it as a punishment. So that was me sort of embracing that sort of emotional thing that they're probably going through.
And I guess I kind of feel like there was a time when you could buy cigarettes no matter what your age was. And then we said, hey, you got to be 18. Or like in my city, my city's made so you have to be 21 to buy cigarettes in my city. So there's probably like a 19-year-old who's like, man, I was smoking for like a whole year and now I can't smoke for 2 more years. And I guess the difference I see, that's not a perfect analogy because as you mentioned, there are ways that a person could be using social media that is not harmful, but I still go back to though, like, it's not just what you're doing, but it's also what you're being exposed to.
It's the exposure part.
That's it.
So even if you yourself are not, bullying people online, you're still being exposed to when somebody else is bullying someone online.
Yeah, I'm exposed to things on LinkedIn every day that makes my skin crawl.
Yeah,
so it's like, I mean, I'd kind of feel bad for the 15-and-a-half-year-old who, like, oh man, I can't get onto social media now or something. I kind of feel bad for him, only a little bit.
It'll make your life better in the long run. You'll thank me later, right?
But what's interesting is, somebody, I saw something where somebody was talking about, oh, kids are just getting around this anyways. Australian kids are now, they're actually sharing their telephone numbers with each other so that they can call each other over voice or even send text messages to each other or something like that, and this, I know, right? But this person framed it as though this was, haha, look, kids have gotten around your ban. And I'm like, when's the last time somebody went viral over a text message? Like that doesn't happen, so you've automatically limited that reach, the freedom of reach that James brought up earlier.
Yeah, that's it. This is all very interesting. And this is definitely an off the rails episode. And I'm okay with that. Like this felt like we needed to get this, like we just needed to get this recorded and at least talk it through. Cause a lot of you guys that listen have young kids, and some of you, we've had conversations like, yeah, you take the good with the bad. Okay. I'm of the opinion personally that there's far more bad than there is good. And I'd love to see it go. But I don't think we're getting that in this country because lobbying and the power to lobby is incredible. But Jim, I do currently hold the belief that this is already bled into AI and that genie is out of the bottle and ain't going back. So this wonderful, potentially generationally changing technology, life-altering technology that is AI and algorithms, has a wickedly bad side to it. That it's going to be, it's going to be difficult to police because now we've conceded that bad things could happen. Sorry, just be responsible.
Yeah. Raph, I know we're wrapping up here. Can I end things on an optimistic note?
I wish you would.
You wish I would. This is my superpower, by the way, is that I can find optimism and stuff, right? But whenever I start feeling down about the state of the kids these days, because again, as a scoutmaster, I see a lot of them, right? And we have a discussion like this. Try to remember that forever, every single generation has felt like the next generation was completely screwed. These kids are either because they're too helpless, they're not smart enough, they're not equipped to handle it, or because the world has become so differently evil than when I was a kid that kids can't. Every single generation has felt that way for as long as we've had the written word. We can go back to examples of people saying, oh, the kids are screwed, right? And we've all come out okay. I don't want to use that as a blanket way of saying like we don't have to think about any of these problems or anything like that, but it's also maybe not as bad as we think it is in terms of like the kids might still
I'm going to take your happy optimism and say, I don't know, dude. Like I know we've all been saying like, oh man, these kids, they're too soft, they're too helpless, they're just not resilient enough. We grew up in a different time, I get that. Things are different. But just a lot of the media, a lot of the internet has done amazing and terrible things, and I will continue to pray that the outcomes of the good outweigh the bad. But I keep getting evidence to the contrary, and until that happens,
I don't know. I think if you described the way we as Gen Xers, I'm going to lump you in here as a Gen Xer, Raph. I don't know actually if you're old enough for this or not.
I'm 100% Gen X.
All right. So if you were to describe the way we as Gen Xers grew up and describe that to a young parent today, to say your kid's going to come home from school and nobody's going to be home, or they're going to leave on a Saturday and you're not even going to know where they are and they're going to come back, those parents would probably come to the conclusion that the kids are screwed. Like, oh my gosh, how can we allow something like that to happen? And then for us on this podcast right now, we're like, yeah, that was a perfectly normal way of growing up. We came out okay. So just because it was scary to describe doesn't mean that.
Know because we as a result of that, we over-rotated and became helicopter parents.
Yes. I've heard this said, every generation rebels against what they view as the previous generation's biggest weakness. And it was probably the hands-off approach that we grew up in led to the helicopter parents, or have you heard of lawnmower parents? That's
no, what's that?
Lawnmower parents, they don't just hover, they actually plow down all of the obstacles in front of their kid.
Oh God. Yeah, I've seen that.
Not to be a doomsday kind of guy, but I think the one major difference between this next generation and previous ones that is a little bit different from the thousands of generations before is the key difference here is we're still in a society where there was time that had to occur between one group and another, right? So instant communications at the levels that we're having human interactions today that can happen instantly around the world, and the type of information that can fly around. We grew up in the internet age. We were pre-internet, right? And now it's post-internet. So now humans have never interacted in the way that this has happened. So I think that's what makes it a little bit interesting. And that's what I think that makes that extra sense in the bottom of your gut go, maybe this is different. So I do agree, Kevin. Yeah, for a gazillion years, we've been like, oh yeah, that they're in trouble, or they don't know any better, or they didn't walk uphill both ways. You know, there's all that generational gap thing. But I think when we all say it, I think there's all still that tinge like, I don't know, this one feels different somehow because
it does feel different, 100%.
You know, it just feels different. But
all right. Well, I'm going to pretend we ended on a happy note, Kevin.
I know. I try to end it on a happy note, and then both of you just pee all over my happy note. Like,
we just vinegar all over that. I'm sorry, not sorry.
I feel like I should post about it.
Yeah.
Go on social media. Go talk to your AI companion about it.
Yeah. No, I'd rather talk to my cat. Okay.
I'll tell you that when I heard about the AI companion stuff, though, and 50% of kids are regular users of it, that one really, I kind of freaked out. Like I got crashed out for a minute about that one.
Yeah.
You know, I have to say some of that is as a parent, you have failed your child. And I know that's a terrible blanket statement to make. I'll say 100%. And some of that is simply not all parents that have kids that go to their AI chatbot over going to your parents are bad. But boy, I bet there's a through line there.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you know, there's definitely going to be some kids who the reason they need to talk to a companion is because their parents are the problem. It's too bad that they're still not going to go to an actual human being, like, you know, a friend or, you know, some mentor that they've found in life or something. And they're going to go to.
We are rapidly. I'll end it on this. We are rapidly transitioning into a point where the movie WALL-E becomes our reality. We're all just going to sit on a chair, watch VR, get fed intravenously, and not have to move, and we'll become some computer's slave. You know, yeah, I don't know.
The part where you said that I get to sit in a chair and just watch TV and not have to like go to work and stuff like that you actually found a way to end this on a positive note. I'm actually really excited about this this world you've described here. So
as Jeremy Clarkson would say, is where we shall end this. Thanks for sticking around, you guys. If you stuck all the way through this episode, this is not your typical. I'm going to put this under the heading of off the rails because maybe we start a new podcast topic that we just every once in a while we just say what's in our brains, and maybe it's security related, maybe it's not, maybe it's loosely, I don't know. But here we are. Thanks for following along, Kevin. Thanks for joining us. Continue to be the good Scoutmaster you are.
Yeah, someday we gotta tell the stories of some of these long cons that we were involved in.
You know what? That's not podcast format. That is meet me at a bar in Vegas. We'll buy drinks and we'll go through these. And yeah, that's a different conversation. There's some things I just don't want recorded, and some of them have me in them. Some of them I know I've heard friends tell stories like, yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that forever. You just don't, because it's funny, but it's funny. All right.
Like
anyway,
Jim, I won't go into all the details, but like one time I learned to speak Mandarin just to mess with somebody. Like that's what I mean by a long con is I invested multiple years in learning to speak Mandarin so that I could have the experience of being in a social setting and just like randomly throwing out that in front of somebody who like that's what I mean by
all right. Maybe we do tell that story.
We're gonna get along like peas and carrots.
Yeah.
All right.
And now we really do have to end this show before this gets weird. Thanks for joining, guys. Thanks for listening and following along. If you've got something to say about the topic, feel free to. There's an option in this podcast where you can use it in your. I think it's on the page, or you can do it through your browser, or through your podcast player. You can send us a note directly. If you're thinking about this topic like we are, I'd like to hear what you're thinking. And on that note, we'll end. Thanks for listening along. Thanks for joining us. This has been another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. So until next time, it is. Bye-bye. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.